Doris Day, the private life behind America's sweetheart. Her grandson breaks the silence on family secrets, Hollywood betrayals, and a legacy the public never saw. When Doris Day passed away in May 2019 at the age of 97, the world mourned the death of one of Hollywood's brightest stars. Tributes flooded in from fellow celebrities, devoted fans, and political figures. She was remembered as a wholesome icon, the golden-haired girl with the perfect smile, the velvet voice, and the uncanny ability to make America feel safe. But Ryan Melcher, her only grandson, found out about her death the same way strangers did. On Facebook. He hadn't seen his grandmother in 14 years. The woman who once sang Secret Love harbored many secrets of her own, a carefully guarded personal life, a history of emotional trauma, a $22 million betrayal, and a manager who allegedly cut off her closest family ties. Now, as public fascination with Doris Day's life continues to evolve, Ryan Melcher is speaking out, and the story he tells paints a far more complicated portrait of the legend America thought it knew. A star is formed in adversity. Long before she became America's sweetheart, Doris Day was just a girl named Doris Mary Ann Kappelhoff, born on April 3, 1922, in Cincinnati, Ohio. Her early years were defined not by glamour, but by hardship. Her father, William Kappelhoff, was a music teacher. Her mother, Alma, a homemaker. Doris had two older brothers, but tragedy struck before she was even born. Her brother, Richard, died in infancy. That early loss cast a long emotional shadow over the family. It also shaped the fiercely resilient spirit Doris would carry all her life. When she was still a child, her parents divorced, a shocking event at the time, especially in a working-class neighborhood. Doris was raised primarily by her mother during the Great Depression. Money was tight, opportunities were few, but Doris found joy in music and dance, showing early signs of the relentless determination that would one day carry her to stardom. At just 12 years old, she won a local contest by standing on her hands for over 3 hours. Her prize, free dance lessons. By then, she had already set her sights on a professional dancing career, but fate had other plans. The accident that changed everything. In 1937, at the age of 14, just as her dreams of becoming a dancer were beginning to take shape, Doris was involved in a devastating car accident. A train struck the vehicle she was in. Her leg was shattered so badly that doctors considered amputation. She spent over a year in recovery, enduring painful surgeries and the crushing disappointment of watching her dreams dissolve. Confined to bed, Doris found solace in the radio. She became entranced by the voice of Ella Fitzgerald, singing along to cope with the isolation and loss. Her mother, recognizing the gift in her daughter's voice, arranged for singing lessons with a local teacher named Grace Rain. Rain would later recall that Doris was the most naturally talented student I ever had. By age 15, Doris was singing professionally, first at a Chinese restaurant for $5 a night, and later in nightclubs around Cincinnati. One evening, while performing at a local venue, she caught the attention of band leader Barney Rapp. He had been searching for a female vocalist for months and was immediately taken by the teenager with the honey-toned voice. There was only one problem. Doris was underage. To secure the job, she lied and said she was 18. It was her first step into a life that would often demand performance, not just on stage, but off. The birth of Doris Day. In 1939, at age 17, Doris Kappelhoff officially became Doris Day. Barney Rapp thought Kappelhoff was too difficult to pronounce, too German, too long, too forgettable. After hearing her sing Day After Day, he suggested a new name. At first, she hated it. Too artificial, too glamorous. But she eventually accepted it, and the name stuck. What she couldn't have known at the time was that Doris Day would become one of the most iconic names in American entertainment history. Fame and the Fortress. Doris Day's big break came when she joined Les Brown's band in 1940. She was just 18, but her voice carried the depth and warmth of someone far older. In 1945, the release of Sentimental Journey catapulted her to national fame. It became an anthem for American soldiers returning home from World War II. From there, her rise was meteoric. Day transitioned seamlessly from music to film, starring in a string of hit movies throughout the 1950s and 1960s, including Calamity Jane, Pillow Talk, and The Man Who Knew Too Much. She was nominated for an Oscar, topped music charts, and was once the highest-paid actress in the world. But behind the sunlit smile and perky characters was a woman growing increasingly wary of the spotlight. She avoided Hollywood parties, she rarely gave interviews, and she surrounded herself with an increasingly small circle of trusted advisors. Some say this was the price of fame. Others suggest it was about something more, something darker. A $22 million betrayal. One of the most devastating blows of Doris Day's life came not from critics or failed relationships, but from her own husband. Martin Melcher, her third husband and longtime manager, controlled every aspect of her career. When he died in 1968, Day discovered that he had squandered her entire fortune. Without her knowledge, Melcher had signed her onto the Doris Day Show, a television series she never agreed to. She was $500,000 in debt and committed to a project she didn't want. She was 46 years old and nearly broke. The betrayal sent her into a tailspin, but true to form, she didn't quit. She honored the contract. She filmed the show. And then, with the help of her son, music producer Terry Melcher, she sued her late husband's business partner, Jerome Rosenthal. After a long legal battle, she won $22 million in damages, though she never received the full amount. Still, it was a rare Hollywood victory for a woman who had been manipulated, mismanaged, and deceived by the men closest to her. The walls of Carmel. After retiring from show business, Doris Day retreated to Carmel by the Sea, California, where she dedicated her life to animal welfare. She founded the Doris Day Animal Foundation and became one of the nation's leading advocates for rescue and adoption. Her home became a sanctuary, not just for animals, but for herself. It was there, behind white gates and high hedges, that Doris Day lived the remainder of her life in near total privacy. Visitors were rare, phone calls were screened. Even family members found themselves increasingly shut out. And for Ryan Melcher, her only grandson, this isolation became deeply personal. Estranged. When Doris Day died at 97, Ryan Melcher learned of her passing on Facebook. There had been no phone call, no message, no final chance to say goodbye. He hadn't seen her in 14 years. According to Ryan, the estrangement wasn't by choice. He claims that after the death of his father, Terry Melcher, in 2004, he was effectively cut off from his grandmother's life by her longtime business manager, Bob Bashara. Ryan says he had been invited to dinner by Doris shortly after Terry's funeral, a gesture that gave him hope of reconnecting. But the meeting never happened. According to him, Bashara intervened, questioning Ryan's motives and blocking any further contact. Over time, the distance became permanent. "I never had the chance to say goodbye," Ryan said. "I never stopped loving her. I just wasn't allowed in." Bashara, for his part, has denied wrongdoing. But the rift remains, a painful footnote in an otherwise celebrated life. The hidden cost of control. Ryan Melcher's account has raised troubling questions about the final years of Doris Day's life. He claims Bashara replaced longtime board members of her animal foundation with his own family and maintained strict control over who could access Day, both personally and professionally. While there's no doubt that Day trusted Bashara, others wonder whether she was truly aware of the extent of her isolation. "She had a fortress around her," one former associate said, and the people inside that fortress decided who was allowed in. What is certain is that Doris Day died the way she had lived her final decades, quietly, without ceremony, and on her own terms. Per her wishes, there was no funeral, no memorial, no grave marker, just a legacy. Remembering the real Doris Day. To the public, Doris Day was America's eternal girl next door. To her grandson, she was a woman of warmth, complexity, and sadness. She was funny, Ryan said. She could be tough too, but she loved deeply, and she loved me. His words paint a different portrait, one not of perfection, but of humanity. And perhaps that is the greatest legacy of all. Doris Day was more than a smile, more than a song. She was a survivor, a woman who endured pain, betrayal, and loss, and still found a way to bring light to others. Behind the image was a person, and behind the silence was a story. It's time we finally hear it. The voice that wouldn't quit. Doris Day's first audition for Les Brown's band nearly ended before it began. Backstage, she was trembling with nerves. Her stomach churned. She got physically sick. Even the strength that had carried her through personal heartbreak and a shattered leg seemed to abandon her in that moment. But Les Brown, who had been captivated by her voice on the radio, wasn't ready to let her slip away. "You've got something special," he told her. "Now go show them." Summoning every ounce of courage she had, Doris walked onto the stage and performed Embraceable You. The effect was immediate. The band was floored. The crowd was moved. Doris got the job, and, with it, her first major step toward national recognition. But the road was not without sorrow. On Valentine's Day, 1941, while traveling with the band, Doris received devastating news. Her older brother, Paul, had been killed in a car accident. She was heartbroken. The pain, raw and immediate, threatened to overwhelm her. But that night, she went on stage anyway. She sang with a depth of emotion that stunned the audience into silence. When the final note faded, many were in tears. This was the moment when Doris Day's voice became something more than pretty. It became powerful. It could convey heartbreak, resilience, longing. She didn't just sing songs, she lived them. A sentimental journey into history. In 1945, Doris and Les Brown's band recorded a track that would become iconic, Sentimental Journey. Brown wasn't convinced it would be a hit. He dismissed it as too old-fashioned. But Doris believed in it with every part of her soul. "If you don't record it," she told him, "I'll walk." Brown relented. The result was electrifying. Despite battling a cold the day of the recording, Doris delivered a husky, emotionally raw performance that only added to the song's poignancy. The track struck a deep chord with soldiers returning from World War II. It became their unofficial anthem, a soundtrack to homecoming and healing. Sentimental Journey sold over 1 million copies in its first year. It made Doris Day a household name. But she wasn't done. The solo star. In 1947, Doris decided to strike out on her own. She signed a groundbreaking 7-year contract with Columbia Records, an unprecedented $1 million deal for a female artist at the time. But success didn't come easy. At her first recording session, studio executives handed her a stack of dull, outdated songs. Doris balked. She knew she could do better. And more importantly, she knew what people wanted to hear. After standing her ground, she was allowed to choose her own material. The result? It's magic. The song became a sensation. Recorded in a single take, it sold over 2 million copies and earned her an Academy Award nomination. Columbia Records was so overwhelmed by demand that they paused production on other releases just to press more copies of Doris's breakout hit. She had officially arrived, and she wasn't just singing other people's songs. She was beginning to shape the sound of a generation. Secret Love, the anthem. She almost didn't sing by 1953, Doris Day was a bona fide star with hit records and a growing film career. When she was cast in Calamity Jane, a Western musical comedy, the film's producers brought her a new song written especially for the film, Secret Love. She hated it. Too sentimental, too syrupy, too forced. She flat out refused to sing it. Desperate, director David Butler showed up at her home late one night with a piano player, a bottle of champagne, and a personal plea. He begged her to reconsider. After some persuasion, and perhaps a glass or two, Doris agreed to give it a shot. The next day, still emotionally raw after a fight with her husband, Marty Melcher, she arrived at the studio in tears. But instead of asking for a delay, she stepped into the recording booth and sang Secret Love in one single take. No edits, no overdubs, no second chances. The result was so powerful that the orchestra fell silent in awe. Some musicians were crying. The engineer couldn't speak. Columbia Records didn't touch a single note. They released the raw version, just as it was. Secret Love became a phenomenon. It topped the Billboard charts for 19 weeks and sold over 4 million copies. It also won the Oscar for Best Original Song, making Doris Day the first artist to star in a film and sing an Oscar-winning number. Ironically, despite the acclaim, Doris refused to perform the song live. She suffered from paralyzing stage fright and turned down an invitation to sing it at the Academy Awards. The decision hurt her reputation among industry insiders, many of whom began labeling her difficult, an unfair judgment that failed to consider her deeply rooted anxiety. But Secret Love would go on to mean far more than even its creators intended. An unexpected anthem. In the 1960s and 1970s, a new audience found meaning in Secret Love, one that saw its lyrics as a poignant reflection of their own hidden lives. The LGBTQ+ community embraced the song as a quiet anthem for forbidden love, secret longings, and the courage to live authentically. Lines like, "Now I shout it from the highest hill," resonated with people coming to terms with their identities in a world that demanded silence. Years later, when Doris Day learned of the song's impact within the LGBTQ+ community, she was moved to tears. She expressed pride that her work had helped people feel seen and understood, even if that had never been the song's original purpose. For a woman who had spent her life navigating the boundaries between public image and private truth, the idea that Secret Love had become a voice for the voiceless meant everything. A twist of fate and a Hollywood debut, Doris Day never planned to become a movie star. In fact, it was sheer coincidence that launched her acting career. One night, while singing at a party, her voice caught the attention of two famed songwriters, Jewel Stein and Sammy Cahn. They were so impressed by her performance that they urged her to audition for a new Warner Brothers film, Romance on the High Seas. The role was originally intended for actress Betty Hutton, who had dropped out unexpectedly. With only days to find a replacement, the studio took a chance on Day. She had no acting experience, but what she lacked in training, she made up for in instinct. Her natural charm, comedic timing, and warm screen presence made her an instant favorite. The film was a hit, and Day was suddenly a Hollywood darling. That single twist of fate, a chance performance at a party, changed the course of her life forever. And it was only the beginning. Films together, Love Her Come Back and Send Me No Flowers. Their on-screen chemistry was magnetic, effortless, and wholesome, a welcome departure from the risque, high-gloss allure of other cinematic pairings of the era. Hudson and Day became one of the most beloved duos in Hollywood history, embodying the ideal of lighthearted romance that America, in a post-war transition toward modernity, so deeply craved. But while the world saw her as America's sweetheart, Doris Day's life off-screen was marked by a complexity that was often swept under the plush red carpets of Hollywood premieres. Behind the dazzling smiles and technicolor gowns lay the burdens of abusive relationships, financial betrayal, and unrelenting public expectations. Her marriage to Marty Melcher, her third husband, began with hope but ended in financial disaster. Melcher, who also served as her manager, controlled both her personal and professional life. He made crucial decisions without her knowledge, signing her up for projects she never agreed to and investing her fortune in dubious ventures. When Melcher died suddenly in 1968, Doris discovered that the man she trusted had squandered nearly all of her earnings. She was left not only in shock, but in debt, millions deep. This financial ruin forced Doris Day back to work, leading to the creation of The Doris Day Show, a sitcom that aired from 1968 to 1973. It was a departure from the silver screen glamour she had known, but it was also a lifeline. Remarkably, despite having no say in initially agreeing to the series, she embraced the challenge. Viewers, perhaps unaware of the circumstances, welcomed her warmly. Ratings soared. Yet behind the camera, Day was rebuilding, quietly reclaiming agency over her life. It was during this chapter that Doris Day began to slowly retreat from the Hollywood scene. In the late 1970s, she moved to Carmel by the Sea, a small coastal town in Northern California. There, she adopted a more private existence, surrounded not by movie producers or agents, but by dogs, cats, and horses. Animals had always been her sanctuary, creatures incapable of betrayal, fiercely loyal, and always honest in their affections. This passion became her purpose. In 1978, she founded the Doris Day Pet Foundation, now the Doris Day Animal Foundation, and later the Doris Day Animal League. These weren't vanity charities. Day was hands-on, using her fame to lobby for humane legislation, promote pet adoption, and end animal testing. In many ways, this chapter defined the legacy she wanted to leave, one of compassion, not celebrity. But even in the sanctuary of Carmel, complexities followed. At the time of her death in May 2019, a deep family rift came into public view. Ryan Melcher, her only grandson, the son of Terry Melcher, her beloved child with first husband Al Jordan, shared in a Facebook post that he had been kept away from his grandmother for more than a decade. He learned of her death not from a phone call or family notice, but via social media. According to Ryan, the estrangement wasn't personal. It was orchestrated by Bob Bashara, Day's longtime manager, who had assumed increasing control over her affairs in her final years. Ryan claimed that Bashara not only restricted family access, but replaced members of Day's foundation board with his own relatives, consolidating power and allegedly isolating Day from those who loved her most. When Ryan attempted to reconnect, shortly after his father's death in 2004, Doris herself had invited him to dinner. It was an olive branch, a quiet overture of reconciliation. But according to Ryan, Bashara intervened, questioning his motives and ultimately canceling the meeting. As the years passed, further attempts were rebuffed. Out of concern for her mental health, Ryan eventually stopped trying. He later expressed regret, but said he feared that pushing harder would cause her distress. This shadow over her final years added a bittersweet note to her otherwise glowing legacy. It also echoed a persistent theme in Doris Day's life: the cost of fame. For someone adored by millions, she was often profoundly alone. Her decision to forego a funeral, a memorial, or even a grave marker stunned the public. But for those who truly understood her, it made perfect sense. Doris had spent a lifetime performing, on screen, on stage, in interviews, and in life. In death, she chose peace. Her remains were cremated, her ashes scattered. No monument, no mausoleum, just the Pacific breeze over Carmel's cliffs. Yet, the absence of a tombstone has done little to erase her memory. Doris Day's songs still echo through time. Que Sera, Sera, Secret Love, and Sentimental Journey are etched into the American musical canon. Her films continue to delight audiences across generations. Her advocacy has saved thousands of animals, and her story, full of resilience, heartbreak, triumph, and transformation, remains one of the most compelling in Hollywood's golden age. Perhaps Doris Day's greatest performance wasn't on camera, but in how she navigated the paradox of being so public, yet so private. She was a woman who survived abusive marriages, public scrutiny, and betrayal, yet never allowed bitterness to consume her. She channeled her pain into purpose, her isolation into action. And while the world may never see her name carved in granite, her legacy is far more enduring, carried in the voices of rescued animals, in the smile of a fan hearing her music for the first time, and in the quiet, lasting impact of a woman who, despite it all, kept choosing love. If you would like me to continue this article to reach exactly 3,000 words, or expand a particular section, just let me know. Enter the UK Top 10 with new material. Critics praised not only the warmth of her voice, but the intimacy and vulnerability that seemed to ripple through every lyric. At an age when most public figures quietly recede from view, Doris Day reminded the world that artistry has no expiration date, and that the heart always finds a way to sing. Even in her 90s, Doris remained active behind the scenes. Though she shunned interviews and rarely appeared in public, she maintained a close correspondence with animal welfare groups, reviewed proposals for legislation, and stayed in touch with friends and fans through letters and carefully monitored social channels. She was selective about who she let in, some say fiercely guarded. But to those she trusted, she remained full of warmth, humor, and the curiosity of someone who never lost her sense of wonder. In her later years, Doris's name also came up in new, sometimes unexpected ways. Modern artists paid homage to her influence. LGBTQ+ communities continued to embrace secret love as an anthem of quiet resilience and longing. Feminist critics reappraised her good girl image, suggesting that beneath the wholesome persona was a woman who had navigated and sometimes defied the rigid gender expectations of her time. Her refusal to be boxed in by typecasting, her ability to command million-dollar salaries, and her transition into a powerful businesswoman and advocate painted a portrait of someone far more complex than her sunny screen character suggested. When she passed away on May 13, 2019, at the age of 97, the world responded with a mixture of nostalgia, admiration, and reflection. Headlines poured in from across the globe. Fans mourned not only the passing of a star, but the loss of an era, the last glowing light from Hollywood's golden age. Still, amid the tributes, controversy lingered over her final wishes. Doris had reportedly made it clear that she wanted no funeral, no public memorial, and no gravestone. It was a striking decision for someone so universally beloved. According to close confidants, she simply wanted to slip away quietly. Yet this choice sparked conversation. Was it another example of her need for privacy, or was it part of a deeper wound, a reaction to decades of betrayal, intrusion, and public scrutiny? Her manager, Bob Bashara, reiterated that these were Doris's explicit instructions, but her estranged grandson, Ryan Melcher, along with some longtime fans, questioned the circumstances surrounding her final years. Melcher's revelation that he had been kept away from his grandmother for over a decade cast a long, painful shadow. His post went viral, not just because of the estrangement, but because it seemed to symbolize the price Doris had paid for her tightly managed legacy. Even so, her life's work continues. The Doris Day Animal Foundation remains active, funding shelters, promoting humane education, and sponsoring medical care for animals in need. Her recordings are still played around the world. Film retrospectives frequently honor her contributions to cinema, especially in highlighting how she redefined what it meant to be a leading lady. And her courage in confronting personal trauma, whether surviving domestic abuse, rebuilding her finances after betrayal, or championing animal rights long before it was fashionable, cements her as more than just a celebrity. She was a survivor. In truth, Doris Day's legacy cannot be confined to one genre, one era, or one interpretation. She was a paradox, fiercely private yet endlessly adored, professionally polished yet emotionally raw, a symbol of innocence who weathered more darkness than most would ever know. In her own way, she challenged the world to rethink what strength looks like and what it means to live with integrity in a world that often rewards illusion. As the sun sets on Carmel, where her ashes were quietly scattered according to her wishes, one imagines the breeze carrying her voice, a gentle reminder that joy, even when hard-won, is still worth sharing. And that, perhaps, is the most Doris Day thing of all. Gentle rhythm of life, he promised. But behind his easy smile, George Weidler harbored a growing resentment toward Doris's rising fame. Their marriage, which began with hopes of stability and love, quickly faltered under the weight of jealousy and emotional distance. Weidler struggled to adapt to life in Doris's shadow, and before long, the marriage crumbled. They divorced in 1949, just 2 years after tying the knot. It was during this period of personal turbulence that Doris Day's professional life soared. She became a constant presence on the silver screen, a box office queen whose every film seemed to break records. But behind the glitz of red carpets and magazine covers, she continued to long for the kind of lasting love she could never seem to find. In 1951, Doris married again, this time to Martin Melcher, a music executive who would become her manager and the man most closely associated with both the triumph and tragedy of her later life. At first, Melcher appeared to be a solid presence. He was ambitious, sharp, and deeply involved in shaping her career. Together, they formed Arwin Productions and took control of Day's film projects, giving her a level of autonomy rare for actresses at the time. However, the partnership would come at a staggering cost. Behind Doris's back, Melcher, along with his business partner Jerome B. Rosenthal, mismanaged her finances, secretly signing contracts and making investments that drained her accounts. By the time Melcher died in 1968, Doris faced a shocking reality when she discovered her fortune was gone, leaving her nearly broke with over $450,000 in hidden debts. The betrayal from her late husband was devastating, leaving her feeling hit by a truck. She initiated a long court battle against Rosenthal for fraud and malpractice, ultimately winning a $23 million settlement, a symbolic victory signaling her strength. Turning away from Hollywood, she found solace in Carmel by the sea, focusing on compassion and service. In 1987, she founded the Doris Day Animal League, tirelessly advocating for animal protection laws while caring for numerous rescue animals. Although she declined public appearances, her bond with her son, music producer Terry Melcher, remained strong until his passing in 2004, which left her heartbroken. Doris continued her advocacy quietly until her death in 2019, choosing no funeral or gravestone, leaving many questions unanswered. Doris Day's life was marked by trauma and a quest for control over her narrative, with her final choice seen as an assertion of agency. Posthumously, her grandson Ryan Melcher highlighted their estrangement, which he attributed to her estate managers. Despite challenges, Day's legacy endures through her timeless music, iconic films, and commitment to animal advocacy. Her story embodies both strength and gentleness, underscoring the intertwining of joy and sorrow, especially seen in her son Terry Melcher's troubled life connected to Charles Manson. Increasingly reclusive, Day managed her foundation amid estrangement from those around her. Following her death on May 13, 2019, questions arose regarding her foundation's changes, contrasting her compassionate legacy